The actual advantage of having a mainly German audience, not only are they here on time, but they're here early. So this is a new experience for me, everyone. You gathered to have used it before, but not like this. As it says there, my name is Alan Kelly. What can I tell you about me? Once upon a time, I was a hardcore programmer, and somewhere along the way, I moved over to the dark side, the non-coding side, and Agile was breaking. And for more than the last 10 years, I've made my life helping people do Agile. People use the word coaching. I'm not too sure about the word, but that's generally what I get called. And in between coaching and training and things like that, I write books. So there you go. That's the book on screen and the one I'm holding up now, Succeeding with OKRs in Agile. I came across OKRs almost by accident a few years ago. A client I was working with, the company decided they wanted to use OKRs, and so I kind of got dropped in the deep end. Until then, I'd known about OKRs, I'd read a little bit about them, but I hadn't experienced using them. And I will freely admit, I started off very cynical of OKRs. I could give you 20 good reasons why OKRs weren't a good idea, why OKRs would make things worse, why we shouldn't be trying to do it, etc., etc. And, all of those things are valid concerns. And if you read the book, you'll find a couple of the later chapters talk about some of the problems that you might have with OKRs and why they might not be a good idea. But as I say, I got dropped in the deep end, and I just made a decision. I thought, I either have to object and walk away from this client, or let's just see what happens. And I thought, I will treat this like an experiment. I will run with OKRs. I'll try and work with them. I'll see what happens. And much to my surprise, not only did I end up liking them, but I found they helped the team work better. And in the months and years since then, I've had a chance to reflect on OKRs and how they work and how they work with Agile. And if anything, I've become more enthusiastic because I think they can help us solve some of the problems we have with Agile. And as I'm about to tell you, I think in OKRs, we have the potential to reawaken some of the original Agile spirit, some of the spirit which over time has perhaps got a little bit diluted, shall we say. I think perhaps OKRs offer us a route to reawakening Agile. So let me get on and tell you about OKRs and why I think they're a good thing. So first off, if you don't already know, OKRs, objectives and key results, or as I prefer to think of them, outcomes and key results. To me, an objective is the outcome you wish to bring about. And OKRs are about outcomes. They're about creating outcomes which make a difference to the world, make a difference to your environment, your company, your employees, whoever. They make a difference. So an objective is an outcome that is yet to happen that you are about to bring about. If you don't know, they started life at Intel in the late 1960s, early 1970s. I'll build on that. I'll say, can I just point out, we don't live in 1970, and not many of you actually work at Intel. And so a lot of what I've found written about OKRs builds on that pre-agile, if you like, 1970 mindset. I think some of what's written we need to update a bit. Most famously, Google adopted OKRs shortly after they were founded, about year 2000, and Google have had great success with OKRs. And what's happened over the years is many other companies have looked at Google and Intel and said, gee, we want to be more like Google. And they see OKRs and they think they found the secret sauce to Google's Googleness, if you like. I sometimes feel as if people just add OKRs and expect their company to turn into Google, and it doesn't. But still, there's good things we can learn from Google and Intel. The objective. The objective is something we really, really want. It's our goal. It's our outcome. It delivers benefit to someone. An objective is not a small thing. This is one way, well, OKRs differ from user stories and what we think about a lot in Agile, which is small piece of work. Objectives are big, meaty things that deliver real benefits. And key results, well, I like to see key results as the bounding criteria or the important contributors and even the acceptance criteria. Some people talk about objectives being subjective. I think it's a bit of wordplay, I'm afraid. The idea that the objective is descriptive of what you want to bring about, and key results are much more objective. Key results are very firm. Key results are often, or should be, backed up with numbers. We should be able to quantify our key results. We should be able to say, how much of this objective have we met? Have we met it 10%, 20%, 100%? Key results are not ticks on a project plan. Key results are not really milestones. And I would rather you avoid thinking of key results as small building blocks that contribute towards the objective. I think when you come from an agile world, it's easy to see OKRs and say, oh, that looks like epics and stories. An objective is a big thing we want, and key results are the small stories that build. And it shouldn't be like that. It's more objectives are big, meaty stories, and key results are the acceptance criteria we want to achieve. So that's your brief intro to OKRs. Let's move on. But first, of course, we have to talk about the virus. Given the last few years, we couldn't ignore the virus. So let's talk about the Agile virus. The Agile virus was first identified around the year 2001, although there's reason to believe it was circulating earlier. And what is clear is it is spread by the use of digital technology. Before digital technology, there are a few isolated instances of Agile breaking out in places. But it was only really with the coming of digital technology, in the first instance, programmers. I remember programmers were the first people to have access to many of the digital tools we now take for granted. Email, instant messenger, webs, wikis. They all started life with programmers, largely because programmers created them and then used them. Those digital technologies are the technologies that we all have now, whether we are programmers or business analysts or marketeers or even lawyers. And when you start to work with digital technologies, it doesn't make sense to work in the same way you used to work. Every business analyst is taught day one of business analysis training. If you change the technology, you need to change the processes to maximize the benefit. And that's what Agile is. Agile is the processes which maximize the use of digital technology. So the Agile virus accompanies digital technology use. And like any good virus, over time it mutates. And sometimes those mutations are for the better, and sometimes those mutations are for the worse. And one of the mutations we've seen with Agile in the last few years is that OKRs have been added to Agile. So although OKRs predate Agile, and OKRs are not mentioned anywhere in the Agile books before about 2000, OKRs are increasingly being seen as part of Agile. So that's one of the recent mutations. But these mutations, they can be for the better. They can make the virus stronger and more and reproduce faster. And sometimes they are not so good. And I see two clear strains of Agile. And the first one I will label corporate Agile. This is a mild form of Agile, a type of Agile where there isn't much damage done, there isn't much change created. This is watered down. We still have many of the traditional artifacts. We just add Agile and expect things to be better. So into this mild Agile. There is another strain of Agile, which I'm calling radical, but I think we could put more of a better name, enrolled Agile or something. This is a kind of Agile that me and many other programmers dreamt about in the year 2000, 2001, when we first heard this word agile. We dreamt of this wonderful world where we'd all be happy and the code would be a joy to work with and everything else. And some places achieve that. A few companies achieve this radical agile and quality working environment and enrolled teams and all the rest of it. And sad to say, they are kind of in the minority. But still, there's these two clear strains of agile here. Corporate agile is characterized as a weakened form of the virus. It has a very high R value. Its reproduction rate is really phenomenal. The downside is the effectiveness is often lacking. You get these organizations where agile is mandated. People are bulk trained in agile and teams are set up and they're even measured by how many ceremonies they do. And you get a very rapid reproduction within the organization of agile. But the effectiveness is lagging. The effectiveness isn't there. Yes, it's better than what went before, but it's not satisfying. You're still left wondering where's all the great things we hope for with agile. Oops, sorry. So the other characteristics of agile, of corporate agile, the administration processes remain intact. You know, we used to dream of being able to get rid of all the administrators and just do work. But no, with corporate agile, we just add agile to what went before, and everything else remains intact. You know, we also find that there's a faith in planning from the organization. The organization's faith that if we just plan hard enough and long enough and seriously enough, then everything will be okay. Planning is more important than implementation. And this is seen as a lack of motivation in the staff, a lack of fun. I distinctly remember one bank I was working with walking around and people were not having fun. People were their same boring jobs as they'd ever had. And Agile wasn't enlightening them. It wasn't moving them forward. They'd still waffle before they gave you an answer. And you also see a lack of experimentation. Yeah. I think every agile team should be experimenting. Every agile team should be changing. In fact, I go as far as to say, if you're doing agile the same as you did 3 months ago, you are not agile. If you're truly agile, you are always trying to change and trying to improve and experiment. And one of the things about corporate agile is they don't want experimentation. They want conformity. So it kind of kills the motivation and the fun. And that means there's a lack of learning. People aren't experimenting, people aren't learning, people aren't trying new stuff. They are just waiting to be told the right thing to do and do it by the book. And there's also a lack of unlearning. As I said before, all our administrative processes remain intact. We don't take anything away. We take all that we had before and we add agile. We add our favorite agile method, our favorite agile scaling framework. And we don't unlearn and dispense with the things which we no longer need. So corporate agile is not very engaging. And it undermines the effectiveness of agile because everyone's trying to do the same thing. Everyone's trying to follow the same playbook, the same blueprint. We've all got the Spotify model. We've all got the Spotify model with some variation of Scrum. And that means there's no longer a competitive advantage to doing agile. So corporate agile undermines itself. Still, what corporate agile does give you is something that was better than what went before. You know, the world before was even worse. Corporate agile comes along, it makes it a little bit better, but doesn't satisfy. So, into this, can OKRs help? Can OKRs move us towards radical agile? Can OKRs offset corporate agile? So, reasons for thinking they could. They offer an alternative to the project model. And I think this allows you to enhance autonomy and fills a middle planning need. And when I say alternative to the project model, whether you are talking as I did a few years ago about no projects or continuous digital, whether you're talking value streams or products over projects or teams over projects, or whether you're talking about the Spotify model and things like that, what you're essentially doing is saying, how do we manage in a model without projects? Because common to all of these things is that we don't we don't have a project. You know, a project defined as something that starts and stops with a temporary team, they largely don't exist in the digital world because our products have longevity. We want to keep working on them. Does Spotify break up teams because they've hit a particular date? No. But in losing the project model, we've lost this middle planning horizon, this longer planning horizon. So we need something to fill in there. One reason why OKRs might be to help is they're well established. They're tried and tested, like Agile was before. You know, we talked about Intel and Google, and even Bono, the rock star, gets cited. Um, and it helps that they're liked by consultancies. You may not like the consultants, but the consultancies like them. Um, and they fit well with Agile. They are very iterative, although they tend to be 13 weeks rather than 2 weeks. I think, and I'll explain in a moment, that OKRs are really a test-driven approach. And ultimately, they can support independent units. They can support pushing autonomy down to our teams and allowing teams to make their decisions rather than having stuff imposed on them from above. And as I've said already, they're outcome orientated. They are about the outcomes. They are not about ticking boxes or milestones on a project plan. They are about delivering outcomes, which is what good Agile's always been about. And finally, failure is an option. In both Agile and OKRs, we should have the option to fail. And if we don't have the option of failing, if failure is not an option, then we play it safe. If we play it safe, we don't learn. If we don't learn, we don't advance the state of the art. If we don't advance the state of the art, we're not having fun. Yeah. So we need to allow for failure. We need to allow ourselves to try something and see it doesn't work, so we know to do something different. I'd also note that failures are motivated to change. If everything you do is successful, why would you ever do anything different? It's only by having failures that we try to do things differently. So, as I said already, objectives are not epics. Objectives are hypotheses of the outcome that is needed, hypotheses of the outcome we are trying to create. Oops, sorry. And key results are not stories. Key results are probably acceptance criteria. And what we really want is to make our key results, our acceptance criteria, testable. We want at the end of our quarter to be able to look at our objectives and key results and say, did we meet that one? Did we miss that one? Or better still, how much did we meet that one? Did we meet that one completely? Is there still some more we could do on that? Not promising to do it. Is there more we could do on it? Did we aim very high and come in higher than average? Or did we play it safe and get 100%? We need to be able to make things testable if we're going to be able to judge our results. And when you put all that together, it's a test first approach. This is test driven development, acceptance test driven development, behavior driven development. It's about saying, this is what we intend to do. This is how we intend to judge our success. And now we are going to work towards meeting that. So for me, OKRs are almost test first management. It's about what we're going to do, how we're going to judge our success. Now we've had to think about that. What are we going to do to bring that world about? Test driven development, test first management, if you like. And I believe OKRs can enhance team autonomy. Now, I'm prepared to agree. This might be a little bit controversial. I know some people are saying OKRs, that they kill autonomy. They are a reinvention of command and control, and I'm not disputing that happens. I'm just going to say, like many other things, OKRs are a tool that can be used for good or for evil. And this is where perhaps the Agile is adding something different to what came before with OKRs. To me, OKRs create space for team autonomy. We have our team, and the team, in writing their OKRs, they paint a box around themselves and they say, this is what we're going to do. This is what we are going to achieve this quarter. These are the outcomes we are going to bring about. And we are communicating these outcomes and the nature of these outcomes to you in a format called OKRs, which you recognize and we can reason about and we can communicate and we can show to people and we can consult on. Teams should be defining their own OKRs, and that gives the teams space for autonomy. And if you think about it, what we're actually doing here is we are turning the team and the OKRs into an API. The OKRs are saying, here is a black box. It contains a team. At the end of this period, this is what the team intend to produce. This is the outcome the team intend to produce by the end of the quarter. And here are how you can measure our success. This is what you can expect from this team this quarter. So OKRs are given as test first management, and they're wrapping an API around the team. Importantly, though, the team have to write that API themselves. The team have to decide what they can do, because the team know best the demands on the team. The team know best their skills. The team know best the technology, perhaps the legacy code base, the raw material they're working with. The team should be setting those OKRs. They will show them to other people. They will consult on them, but they shouldn't be given those OKRs. And this is why OKRs can reawaken Agile, because it's about giving teams autonomy and power. Now, as I just described, lots of people see OKRs coming from the top down. And the origins of OKRs are a thing called management by objective. Again, another 1960s idea, kind of died out in the 1970s into the 80s. And the idea behind management by objective, or MBO as it's known, is that somebody at the center of the organization or the top of the organization issues some management by objectives. And those objectives are passed down to the middle managers. And the middle management set objectives and they are passed down to the next layer below them. And so it goes on. Each layer receives their objectives from the central planning unit. Each layer writes objectives for the layer below them. And so it cascades down the organization. And yes, companies do try and cascade OKRs. I think that is fundamentally flawed myself. And I think it's easy to prove. If we were to say key results are acceptance criteria for an objective, how are we going to take those key results and hand them off to different teams? Yeah, one team's been told to make this solution usable, and another team's been told to make this solution fast. Yeah, it doesn't, it won't work that way if your acceptance criteria are your key results. So cascading OKRs, not very agile. Cascading OKRs conflict with agile. They are in effect a return to command and control. And this is one of the reasons many people don't like OKRs. So let me propose a different model to you. We have our teams, and our managers are embedded in our teams. And we have the leadership of the organization. And the leadership of the organization talk about the purpose of the organization. They talk about the missions, the destination. They talk about organizational priorities. And yes, they probably allocate resources around the organization. But the leaders, they did talk about those big things that the whole organization is going to pull towards, the organizational priorities. They talk about them. But you know what? They don't get into detail. This is deliberate. This might upset you, but I don't think leaders should be getting into details. Leaders should very deliberately be leaving white space. The leaders talk about the big goals, the purpose, the organizational priorities. The teams And the teams are largely standing teams. They're largely continuous teams. Personnel may change, but the teams are standing teams. And those teams have their specializations, their particular skills. Those teams, they look at what the leaders are attempting to achieve. They look at the organizational priorities. They look at the resources the leaders have made available in the first instance. And the teams respond. The leaders say, how can you help us meet these goals? And the teams respond. And the teams respond with OKRs. The teams come back and say, this quarter we will. This quarter we will help towards those organizational priorities by doing this. This quarter we will advance the product we support in this way. The teams come back. The leadership talk about the organizational priority, the end goal, the destination, whatever you want to call it, and the teams come back. And this is not a one-way conversation. It's not leaders passing objectives down, and it's not teams passing objectives up either. It is a consultation exercise. It's a conversation. So rather than think of your organization as a hierarchy with somebody at the top and somebody at the bottom, and let's be honest, that's how 99 out of 100 people draw organizational charts. So as much as we talk about getting away from a hierarchy, everyone still draws their organizational charts like that. So let's do something different. Let's think about your organization not as a hierarchy, not as a 1970s structure chart, but as the solar system, as a a excuse me, a set of planets or teams circling a center. And we have our center, we have our leadership of the organization. It may be one person, a CEO, or it may be more devolved in a team, but there are people, particularly as a CEO, who everybody in the company has a relationship with, because everybody in the company know who the CEO is. And some teams are closer to the CEO. Some teams sit outside the CEO's door. Some teams sit in a completely different country. Some teams see the leader every day. Some teams very rarely see the leader. But they all have a relationship with the leader. The leader sets out the goals. The teams propose their OKRs. And now we can have a conversation. The teams can talk to the leader or leaders, whoever is most appropriate, and talk about what the team intends to do. And if necessary, the teams can talk to the other teams. And because the teams have a shared format, we can compare and contrast. We can see which teams are supporting and what they're doing. And if necessary, we show them to the leadership. We get the leaders' feedback. We may even modify them a bit. But there's a multi-dimensional conversation going on here about with whoever you need to talk to. It's a bit of a mess, really. It's really quite messy, but that's real life. The other analogy I like to use here is raindrops on a pond. Take a pond, the rain's falling into it. This is a lot like the way our organizations work. Yes, there is a CEO, and the CEO may make the biggest splashes, the biggest puddles, but there's ripples going out from the CEO. There's messages the CEO is sending out. They're coming out, but they are not the only ripples there. You've also got your competitors. Your competitors are doing their best to disrupt you. Your competitors are doing their best to steal your lunch. And sometimes what the competitor's trying to do and what the CEO's trying to do are the opposite. And sometimes they complement and it feels really bad for your team. And then you've got your customers. Your customers have a voice in all of this. And then you've got your team itself. Your team's got its own priorities, its own goals, its own things it feels need to be done. And then you've got the other teams that work with your team. So our organization is a lot more like a puddle of water with rain dropping into it. You've got all these waves coming out, and the waves are interfering and complementing each other. And the best you can do is say, for our team, for our bit of the world, this is how we are going to process all this incoming information. And we are regularly going to codify it and reflect it in OKRs. And then we'll do our best to achieve it. So, whew, Every organization exists for a purpose, and the purpose is largely invariable. Why does your company exist? Or if you're not a company, your government department, your charity, why does your organization exist? And how do you benefit society? At the end of the day, and post COVID, post 2008, this is a really big question. Your organization should exist to benefit society. If you only exist to create further profits and increase earnings per share, it's not going to be a very fulfilling place, and you're not going to find people want to work there. Organizations exist for a purpose, and that purpose should be to benefit society ultimately. And within those organizations, we have missions. And some organizations are small and they have one mission and it aligns perfectly with purpose. Other organizations are large and there are multiple missions, all trying to further the purpose of the organization. But notice, purpose is largely invariable. Purpose lasts a long, long time. Missions come and go, but missions are very open-ended and missions may last years. You know, they don't start and stop, they don't start and stop every day. There's a few limited number of serious important missions and they don't change. And OKRs come into this, and OKRs are an opportunity to a regular interval. That's every 3 months, we wipe the slate clean and say, how does this team add to the mission? How does this team add benefits? How does this team further where we're going? And every 3 months, it's an opportunity to wipe the slate clean and think today is day one. The missions are probably still the same missions, the purpose is still the same purpose, but how is this team going to move us forward? And by involving purpose and missions, we get some of the energy back into Agile. It's no longer about burning down your backlog. It's about doing something to make a difference to the world. So excuse me while I have a drink of water. Mm. And this has to be at the team level because teams are the only ones who can balance all this incoming work. And OKRs offers an opportunity to supercharge that prioritization. For many teams, it's become a very hand-to-mouth existence, constantly needing to do stuff, and they've lost purpose of the missions and the goals and the missions. Sorry, they've lost track of things. If you think about your team, where does your work come from? You probably, if you're following an agile approach, you probably have a backlog of some description somewhere. Um, it used to be written on index cards. Now it's more likely to be an electronic system of some sort. It's probably very big, and you're probably expected to do it. But likely, it's not the only thing you're expected to do. You may have to answer support desk calls. Maybe you're unlucky and have to actually answer the phone, or maybe you're third line support, but still, you have customers, you have things going on outside the organization, and it's causing issues for you, and your team has to support them. Maybe you've got to help with operations. Maybe you are a DevOps team. And if somebody finds a security hole in your logging library, you damn well need to upgrade that logging library, and you don't want to wait while you upgrade the logging library. Maybe your machine, your servers need upgrades. Maybe you need to install. It's a million one things that if you're DevOps teams, you may need to do, and they aren't in the backlog because you don't know if tonight somebody's going to reveal a new day zero attack. Okay. And you might be lucky and have a sales team that speaks to your developers. And you may find salespeople show up at desks and say, can you just do this feature for this customer? And maybe you have actual customers who speak to you. Yes, maybe your customers come along and ask directly for things. And maybe your team has history. Maybe somebody on your team used to work in another team at the same company, and periodically that other team turn up and say, hey, we need you. You need to do something for us. You're the only person who knows this thing. You come with history. So your team doesn't just have a backlog to do. It has lots of things to do. It's one thing for the CEO to say, this is where we're going, go and burn down your backlog. but your team has lots of demands on its time. No team is an island. And unfortunately, some teams find that their managers have heard about these OKR things and they come along and say, oh, by the way, in addition to the backlog, the support desk, the DevOps, the sales team, the history, and the customers, can you also do OKRs? Let's be clear here. If you simply add OKRs and do not remove something else, you're just increasing work in progress and things are going to get worse. What you want to do is make everything subservient to OKRs. You set your OKRs, and your OKRs tell you how much support desk, how much sales, how much history, etc., that you're able to do. If you should not be helping with the sales channels, then it shouldn't be in your OKRs. If you shouldn't be helping other teams in your organization, then it shouldn't be in your OKRs. If you have to do some kind of DevOps, your OKRs should reflect that. If we just make OKRs about shiny new things, people won't have an accurate idea of the capacity of the team, and our OKR conversations will not be as beneficial as they could be. So we make everything subservient to OKRs. In fact, I would say don't get out of bed in the morning if it's not in your OKRs. If it's not in your OKRs, stay in bed, lie in. Which does raise one point. What do you do about the backlog? What do you do when the backlog says this and the OKRs say do that? What happens when they start to come in conflict? Well, I faced this a few years ago, as I said, when I was using OKRs. And cut a long story short, after a couple of experiments, we concluded that the OKRs should be in the driving seat. The backlog should be in the back seat. You set the OKRs. If there's useful stuff in the backlog that can contribute to the OKRs, then by all means do it. But just because something is in the backlog doesn't guarantee it's going to get done. If something is in the OKRs and it's not in the backlog, just write out a new ticket and damn well do it. The OKRs take priority. And when you follow that line of thought to its logical conclusion, I have to say, throw your backlog away. I don't really see the need for a backlog anymore. Let OKRs drive all your work. Use OKRs as a story generator. Every time you need more work to do, every time you're in a planning meeting, go back to your OKRs and say, to move forward in this OKR, what do we need to do with this? If you happen to have a backlog, if you happen to have a story ready, great. If not, write it out and do it. So think strategically, outcomes over output, end the tyranny of the backlog, and adopt a more objective-driven agile working style. That's why I think this has capacity to re-enliven agile. Skip that one. So finally, success. How do you know you're successful? Step back, because we know that hitting 100% of your OKRs is not success. Every OKR book tells you that. And the message hasn't got through to everybody. Some people still want perfect predictability, and the idea of missing some OKRs is not good in their book. Famously, Google talk about hitting 70% of OKRs. I'm not sure even that's a good target, because once you have a number, people can game the system. Success is really your outcome. Success means you step back and for once you don't look at the OKRs and the key results. You say, what is the value we've added, the benefit we've created? How have we advanced the mission? How have we made society better? What have we learned? What hypotheses have we tested? The reason for setting objectives and key results is not so much to achieve objectives and key results, but more to make us think long and hard about the work we're going to do in the next period. And because we reset them, we are not beholden to the past. And all of that is our original idea of agile, which is why I think agile can reawaken our enthusiasm. Whoa, thank you. Gather Town is going to be very distracting while I'm trying to present with all these people moving around. How do I fire?